Okay, this is take two because the first time I tried recording this, everything fucked up. So, this all started because I looked at Bot's post from like 3 days ago, and Firecracker is basically just Matt Gates now. They did something similar with Homelander when Trump was working at McDonald's and Homelander was working for Whataburger. As I scrolled through the comments, people didn't really seem to mind this, and they seemed to embrace it. They thought it was really funny and stuff. But personally, I'm tired of seeing these things on my feed, even though I really enjoyed the show. So, this post that I saw was the push I needed to make my own critique of The Boys. And I watched multiple people's critiques on it, including Bungie's, and agreed to almost all of the points they made. So I might repeat some of their points, but I have a few of my own that I'd like to share as well. So the first thing I want to talk about is that they use real world politics as a crutch, specifically US politics. People have made stories based off of politics throughout history, but at least they made an effort to make them interesting and somewhat original. An example of it is Macbeth, who's talking about this king that existed back in the day, but Shakespeare made it somewhat magical and an interesting story, to be honest. And Inglourious Bastards is a movie where the main antagonist is Hans Landa, and he's a very despicable person. He prides himself on hunting down Jews, but despite him being a very terrible and very terrifying person, they still made him interesting to watch in a way. And another example is 1984, which is more dystopian and not as based off of real things, I'd say. But it does show a lot of political oppression and abuse of power and stuff. And another thing that George Orwell wrote is Animal Farm, which is a little bit more specific to socialism, and it's portrayed with animals, obviously. So that's kind of similar to how The Boys is trying to do this with the Soups, even though they started off as just kind of celebrities. I don't really like the way The Boys does it because it just seems bland, unoriginal, lazy, and like I said before, it doesn't really grab your attention like a story should. It just seems like any other political slop. I feel like there should be a reason why we should want to watch it, because I feel like I've never done like a show before, but it's kind of the point. Like when you make a painting, you want people to see it, you want it to not be ugly, you want it to be something you're proud of, and you can't really expect something to be super interesting if you just oversaturate it with politics. I think you have to make it interesting at least. You don't even have to look up the people in the show. You can just watch the show and realize where they stand politically. And the thing that I hate about this the most is that characters become flanderized because of this. For example, Homelander. So his whole story is that he's a man who was raised in a lab, and he was made to be the perfect product, like the perfect soup. But throughout his childhood and stuff, he faced a lot of abuse. And the scientists didn't give him love or anything. They just kind of treated him like an object like a product, like an experiment. So he becomes a monster. And this was actually a pretty interesting thing about him. It was his character. But throughout the seasons, he just becomes basically like a little Trump. He's just a symbol for the right. And besides like the political stuff, he's just like a little man baby. I know that that's kind of part of his thing because he never had love as a child and he wants like parental, especially maternal love and stuff. But I feel like they take it too far. He's very pathetic and he's not even really that intimidating to me. Because of that, he's not really scary. He's just kind of like a little toddler, and it's not even like funny watching that at one point because it's so overdone. Okay, the other thing I want to talk about is that there's too many racist characters in The Boys. Like, this takes place in New York, and New York is a cosmopolitan city. It's a very diverse city, and somehow they always seem to hate black people, which is weird because there's not really a lot of minorities besides like Kamiko and Kamiko's brother and Supersonic, who was Latino. From what I remember, that was it. And everyone else is just black and white, at least the main characters. And it's kind of weird because we're made to believe that they're very oppressed, but they're also a majority along with the white people in the show because that's the most people that we see. So yeah, they're always racist to black people, with the exception of Kamiko's brother when Stormfront was chasing after him. But during all that, she was literally destroying the projects just because she hates people that are not white so much. But it makes sense because she's a Nazi. That's her whole character. But there's other examples like Blue Hawk. He was just over patrolling the neighborhood where A-Train's brother lives. To be honest, I felt like Blue Hawk just seemed like a tool for A-Train to deal with his redemption arc, and I honestly feel like he didn't need to take down a racist to look better. I feel like he could have just done that with any other villain. I know that it's like a thing that he realized on his own that he needed to do, but I don't know, it was just a thought. I don't really mind it that much. I don't really mind Blue Hawk's character. Another thing that bothers me is the character Tech Knight. He's just a racist caricature, basically. I'll talk about him later. So the general public in The Boys, they're very stupid. Like, honestly, they're basically just NPCs. They're brainless zombies that are there just to worship the soups. And they don't really think of anything else besides that. We know that Todd is Homelander's biggest fan, but honestly, all of the non-main characters, honestly, because the boys are human, they don't really think about how bad everything is, and they just kind of accept anything that comes to them. They accept when they get hurt by soups, they accept when they're taken advantage of, they accept when their loved ones die because of soups. And it just makes me wonder, why aren't there more groups like The Boys? There should be at least people who've tried to be like that, but maybe failed. I just don't find it believable that we as a human species wouldn't have tried to fight back against something that is a threat to us. Though soups are kind of human too, but you know what I mean. They're actually a threat to human beings. We're no longer the apex predator or whatever. Now I'm just going on like a nature rant, but anyway. Okay, so going back on how characters are just characters of themselves, I'm just gonna list off some things that I've observed while watching the show. So Homelander is just a child, obviously. Starlight is almost a Mary Sue because, according to the show, she kind of like is just kind of perfect and doesn't do a lot of things wrong. Even if she does, it's kind of like she expects people to just forgive her. And A-Train's basically just black for most of the series until like season 4 when his arc begins. Maeve is a depressed alcoholic who's also bisexual. And Deep is a loser who touches fish. And Firecracker is white trash. And a lot of the characters lack meaning to the plot. Stormfront seemed like one of the only villains that was useful to the plot, because there were like a lot of villains and stuff, but it just felt like there was going to be something there, but it's not there yet. Maybe they're gonna bring it out in season 5, but I just feel like a lot of the things they're going to leave out a little bit. Like, I don't know how Soldier Boy is going to be significant in season 5, but I hope to see him because I actually really like his character. Talking about minor characters now, like, I don't know, like Termite and Lamplighter and stuff. It was actually kind of interesting to see them, but they were just there for like a couple of episodes before they died, and I know that they're not major characters and they're not part of the story, but it's just kind of expected that when you see soups that aren't really involved with the boys or the Seven, that they're just gonna die off soon. And I think that Starlight isn't really a good contrast to Homelander, and I'm only saying this because the show keeps on putting home teamers and Starlighters against each other. So Starlighters and home teamers, that's the name of their little fandoms, I guess. Home teamers, they represent like the more conservative, right-leaning people, and Starlighters are the more liberal, left-leaning people. And they always just, of course, because the media always does this, they're always like yelling at each other and blindly hating each other. I feel like they should have at least people that disagree with both parties, or at least kind of find a place in the middle, because there's always people like that. And honestly, just like seeing all of these conflicts between them, it's not really that interesting. It's just like, oh, this is just talking about politics again, stuff that's going on now. And I know people are like, oh, but it was always a political show, didn't you know? But I would rather them to have an original story and focus more on that than the politics. The politics should be just a topic that's included in the show, but it shouldn't be the main focus, I think. This is a superhero franchise, and I know that it's satire, but they should at least make it entertaining, even if they're making it a little bit more edgy and stuff. And speaking of Starlight, I don't like how she is surprised when the enemy fights dirty, because she's literally been doing that. She's been scheming and sneaking around and exposing Vought, which is a good thing, but she didn't expect them to fight back. They're a huge company and literally the best soups in the universe, in this show universe, are there. So of course they would fight back. For example, she was Super shocked when Homelander showed her Supersonic's corpse, and she was just like, oh, why would you do that? But it's like obvious, you shouldn't have involved him. That kind of pissed me off. Supersonic just seemed like he wouldn't survive in this universe, and he was kind of too clueless. And in my opinion, it was kind of her fault, but you may disagree with me on that one. But anyway, she was surprised, even though she wasn't involved in it, but the boys killed Translucent and stuff, so it's not unusual of them to use violence against everyone else. Oh yeah, and there's other examples of this too, like when Noir came and attacked her and her mom at the cafe, and when Firecracker exposed her abortion on live TV. And she was always so shocked about stuff like this, even though she knew she was in danger because she's working against these people. And talking about Firecracker's situation, that was a pretty shitty thing to do, but that was the point. She was trying to make her look bad to some of her audience. And I don't think Starlight should be surprised about things like this. Okay, so another person I want to talk about is Sister Sage. Sister Sage is not written well to be an intelligent character. That's her whole power. She's the smartest woman in the world. And she doesn't really calculate or doesn't really feel things out before she determines things to be true. She just kind of expects things to happen because she's smart, or if things go wrong, she takes credit for them and just says, oh, this is fine. This is all part of the plan. I knew that was gonna happen. And this might be a little controversial, and you can disagree with me on this, but I feel like if she were a super genius, I feel like she would be able to outsmart the oppression she faces. Like, before she met Homelander, she was telling him a story about how she found a cure for cancer and she wanted to help her grandma with it, but the doctors didn't want to treat her because her grandma was a Black Panther back in the day. But I'm pretty sure it was mostly because she was like 9 during that time, and who would believe a 9-year-old without any proof? But if she were to face racism, right? This is like the more controversial part. So like racism is fueled by hate, which is an emotion that could be very irrational, right? I feel like since it's like an emotion that could be irrational, she could use that, she could be able to manipulate people in a way to see things in another perspective, at least for the time being that she needs them. And by the way, I'm a person of color. I don't really think it matters if a white person said this too. I would agree with them. But you can disagree with me too. I don't really mind. It was just an idea that I was thinking about because I feel like a person who's very intelligent would be able to manipulate people in a way that others would like them more. Okay, so another character I want to talk about, which I mentioned earlier before, is Tech Knight. I think he's a waste of a good character. He could have been very interesting to the plot and stuff. They were hyping him up in Gen V. He was actually a character in that show, in the spin-off show. But in The Boys, he didn't really seem to do much. He was just there for shock value. I think he could have been a good villain. Talking about Gen V and stuff, he was pretty, he was like a very smug, very confident man who knew how to work around things, and he knew how to get the answers he wanted. and he's a soup detective. He can be very corrupt too. In Gen V, it was revealed that he sometimes twists things in a way so certain innocent people get accused of certain crimes, and sometimes it drives them to kill themselves. It's that bad, but he just does it for the drama and to look good. That's like a pretty fucked up thing to do, but honestly, that's like, wow, that's actually an interesting character right there. And they also, in The Boys, they mentioned how his parents own private prisons, and then it got passed down to him once they passed away. Vernon Corp, it's called. So I know Sister Sage and Homelander were going to use that aspect to make internment camps for people. But I think that it could have been cool, like making a twist on Bruce Wayne, or actually not at all. It's just kind of pointing out the fact that, so like, you know, the joke about how Bruce Wayne never kills villains and he just kind of like catches them and then lets them go, only for them to go back in prison because, you know, they'll never change. So I think that could have been a cool aspect with Tech Knight. He could be knowingly going through this cycle, and he could deny it because he's like rich and powerful and he knows his way around words and stuff. And yeah, he would just kind of be like abusing his power with criminals, and it would be kind of like an interesting aspect of him. He could have been a little bit more villainous in an interesting way and not just being the way he is in The Boys. And what I mean by that is that just talking about the whole Tech Night Party episode, it was so bad. I was cringing the whole time. And it wasn't even mostly his doing, it was a lot of Ashley. Even before that, she's just kind of known to be like a dommy mommy. Especially with Cameron Coleman. He's a news anchor. That's what it's called. But yeah, she's always like getting freaky and stuff, and I honestly don't really care for that. And just like the Tech Night Party in general, it was just kind of like unnecessary. It was just there to torture Huey. And I think even though they were trying to make it funny, it wasn't really funny at all. Like he was actually traumatized after that. And it was just there for shock value, and most of what was going on besides the boys trying to rescue Huey was Homelander trying to appeal to the elites, even though he was failing because he just knows how to spew like dumb, stereotypical political stuff, and they weren't taking it because they actually know what they're doing and stuff. So I think that that was part of the reason why Tech wasn't there, but I still didn't really care much for that episode. I think Tech Knight is funny, and even with his fixation of holes, which was more talked about in Gen V, even though it was mentioned with Huey, if you know, you know. Like, it's actually pretty funny. I don't know, it was just kind of like the whole episode was mostly just focusing on how he's like a kinky rich man. And there's already so many of those in real life and the media that it's not really shocking or anything. It's just kind of like, okay, you're another stereotype. Let's move on from that. And speaking of all of these things that happen in this episode, I believe that the show relies too much on sexual deviance and shock value. even though some of the scenes sometimes they're not that bad. For example, like Huey and Starlight, and going a little bit more intense like Homelander and Stormfront. But it's just like, okay, I'm watching two people do the tango once again. I don't really want to see that. I'm not even that like conservative, like clutching my pearls, looking away about stuff like this, but it just happens like almost every scene, and it's not helpful, it's not funny, it's not that important to the plot. So I feel like they should focus more on the actual story than the majority being for shock value. Like, I understand that Herogasm was actually a part of the plot and there was lore to it, like, even with the comics, so I didn't really mind that episode. It wasn't even that bad. They were just kind of like fucking with mother's milk. But besides that, it's just like Ashley, like I said before, and Deep touching fish and diddling them, uh because haha, he can speak to fish, he's in love with them, they have that kind of relationship. But honestly, I even if it's fictional, I don't like zoophiles. I really hate them. So in turn, I hate Deep. He could have been a little bit more interesting, even though I think the whole point of him is being a loser. But uh, besides that, it's just kind of unnecessary. And like I said before, it takes up almost most of the episodes. And I'd rather them have more time for the story instead. I hope that they do that more in season 5, because literally that's the last season. That's the most they can do. I hope they focus more on the story, especially because it's the last season. If I see another shock value type thing, I would just be like, okay, this is where we're going now. Okay, so these are like rapid fire points because I honestly don't care that much about them. So first of all, Newman died by butchering Kessler so easily. She was supposed to be OP. Like, she has blood-bending powers. She popped people's heads off without them knowing. No one even knew she was a soup until they found out about Red River, like the boys did. And then Homelander found out that she is, what's his name? Gus Fring. Stan Edgar's daughter. So then Homelander outed her as a soup in front of everyone, like the public and the media and stuff. But anyway, my point is that she has a very powerful ability, and while she was being attacked by Butcher slash Kessler, even though she was suspended from the air by his tendrils, I understand that she could be facing like the freeze response in a fight, flight, or freeze response, but she was very capable before, so why couldn't she do anything now, at least to another character or something? Or at least something minor, at least to show that she tried, but she just didn't do anything and she got snapped in half. Her death was very underwhelming. Like, while I was watching it, I was just like, oh, okay, she's dead now. I guess we're not going to see more of her now. And talking about the boys, Frenchie, it feels like the writers made Frenchie bi because the writing team kind of forgot about him and suddenly thought of making him a little bit more unique, or at least trying to make him important to the plot again. Honestly, I feel like it would have stayed the same if he just tagged along with everyone and not been so significant to the plot. Uh, I know that he was like resolving his traumas and stuff, but it happened so suddenly that it doesn't really feel that necessary. Maybe it will be in season 5, but I'm not sure because like after his relationship with Colin, he ended up with Kamiko anyway. And then once they were together, uh he and Kamiko got kidnapped by Sam and Kate, and I guess they're from Gen V, but I guess they're going to be important now to season 5. So basically, it was just like, oh, his whole arc with Colin, then he goes to Kamiko, and they're together now, and then they got kidnapped. So, what was all that for? We didn't really need to see that, I guess. Like I said before, I don't really care that much about this aspect, but I just think it was written very oddly. And my last point, I really hate Deep. Like, why did they have to make him a zoof pile? I just hate him. This is personal Deep. So overall, I enjoyed the concept of a world where superheroes are seen as celebrities and their industry is corrupt. It's kind of like Hollywood, but with soups in New York. And I also like how there are people who don't agree with soups, like the boys. Although I think the amount of people that disagree with them is a bit unrealistic. And even if they do, they kind of die off quickly. Like, I forgot her name, the CIA agent that died because of Brian. Anyway, so yeah, it's just kind of like the main boys that are surviving so far. And I understand that they're just humans and it's not very fair to have a human against a soup. And the soup will obviously win very easily, but it just seems a bit, I guess, like hopeless. And it's just kind of like you want to cheer them on, but you also expect them to die. Especially in season 5, a lot of people are already speculating that some of the boys will die. And I feel like that would be kind of bleak. Maybe it'll work out though, who knows. Besides that, I think that the world of the boys could be very diverse in the people's morals and how they feel about living in a world with soups and stuff. Like, there could be people that disagree or agree and team up with soups. And there could be, like, I guess, like younger soups who have a different perspective on things. Like Sam and Kate, even though I don't know, I don't really like how that turned out, but it might be interesting to see along the line in the future. So fingers crossed that it actually turns out good. And I'd like to say that the idea about soups and kind of like a adult version of superheroes and a little bit more edgy version of those types of stories actually sparked my imagination a bit. I used to be interested in superheroes when I was a kid, but I guess I grew out of it. So it genuinely sparked my imagination and I got interested in superhero content again. So I'll give them that. I know I've been hating on this show for like, I don't know, maybe half an hour now, but I genuinely do appreciate it and I do like the characters even though they're a bit flawed. I wish they can focus some of these things for the next season, though I doubt that they'll make so much changes because it's the last season and they might not have a lot of time to make things a little bit better, but who knows, maybe they will. I hope so. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to meow into my mic for a particular soup detective.